Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and I just finished processing my garlic, and it's now curing. I plant about 200 to 250 heads of garlic every year, and right now it's middle to late July, and I've harvested all of it. Sometimes I harvest it a bit later, but this has been a very hot and sunny summer, so the garlic's ahead of schedule. Usually, the indication that it's time to harvest your garlic is that 4 or more of the leaves on the stalk have turned brown, right? They got brown tips or they're completely brown, that sort of thing. Dying leaves on the stalks, the leaves, is the indication that it's time to harvest them. So let me show you what I've got here, and I'll tell you what. I've done other videos on this. I just thought I'd do a fast video, a quick video, summarizing the whole process very quickly. All right, so all I do is I cut them off about varying sizes here, really big fat ones, nice ones like this, and then sort of smaller ones like you might get from the grocery store, right? These are all the same variety of garlic, music garlic, or white, I think white porcelain is another name for them. The simplest way to explain it is we pull them out of we pick a nice warm sunny day, we pull them out of the ground and very gently shake the dirt off the roots, and we just lay them out in the sun all day. And then at the end of the day, I came home from work yesterday, and I just cut these off, and then I remove the roots from the bottom, and I lay them out on a piece of cardboard like this, all of them spaced out a little bit, and it's enough for air, right? And I've got a fan here, okay? Just a small fan, and it's moving air over them, okay? If you don't do that, and you're in a humid environment like I am, this is the Maritime Gardening Podcast, right? If you don't do that, they can get mold. You cut off the roots and all that sort of stuff because, again, that can capture moisture and you can get mold and mildew and stuff like that. So, I mean, the temperature in the room here is, it's about 21, 22 degrees Celsius. Room temperature, just a little bit warmer than room temperature. So I've got airflow going over these. If you have a shed or some other situation where you can have good airflow, that you don't need a fan. It's just a question of airflow. You don't want them out in the sun because the UV is going to degrade them, right? You don't want them getting too hot, you don't want them getting too cold. You want them kind of at room temperature for about a week with a fan going, okay? The reason they cut the roots off is so that it can't hold moisture, so the whole thing can dry out and it can just be like garlic wrapped in a paper bag, which is kind of what a head of garlic is. Some of these I set aside. I take all the biggest ones, the biggest, nicest, goodest, best ones, and I set those aside to use as seed garlic. I set about 50 of those aside. 50 or 40, depends on how many I have, okay? Because remember, these are all the same variety, and they're all basically clones. That's how garlic works. When you take this, when you plant this part, you get a clone, right? But the bigger and fatter the clove, the bigger, generally speaking, the bigger and fatter the garlic, relative to how much sun they get when they're growing and how healthy and nutrition, how much nutrients there are in the soil, how rich the soil is. You got rich soil and lots of sun, and you plant a big bulb, you're going to get a big garlic, right? And you plant a small bulb, you're going to get a smaller garlic, generally speaking, okay? How do I store these? I just put them in a cardboard box with layers. So I'll put a layer of garlic, a piece of cardboard or a brown paper bag, and then another layer of garlic, and close the box up. Over the years, I've stored them different ways. I find they keep best if you put them somewhere cool. So if you've got a cold room, you put them in a cardboard box, that controls the humidity, right? But I found that if you can get them somewhere cool, like a cold room, a root cellar, they're going to keep better. I don't have anything like that. I just have an old fridge. This is our old fridge. It used to be upstairs. Now it's in the garage, right next to the outboard motor. Right, so I use this. It's relatively inexpensive to run a second fridge for a year. All things being considered, it's certainly cheaper than building a cold room. Certainly when you're 52. There's just no point. You're not going to see the return on investment, I don't think. So I don't know what it costs to run this year, but it's $50 or something. I can't remember. I'd have to look that up. Maybe I'll put it in, and I'll put a little text box in the video if I can figure that out. But they keep so much better when they're cool like that. I don't put them in the freezer, just in the fridge. And I use these garlic right up until April, sometimes even May. Now, I mean, they're at their best right up until February, and then at some point between March and April, they get a little dehydrated. I mean, it's alive, right? You got a live bulb in there. But at some point, they get a little dehydrated, and yeah, they just don't. They're still, you can still, you know, like, so if you're using them in April or May, they're still good and you can still use them and all that sort of stuff. But they're just not, they lose a little bit of water. And in a sense, they're more concentrated, but they don't go bad. They just slowly and gradually desiccate in the fridge, but it takes a long time. I've tried storing them once I've dried them at room temperature, but I've had mixed results. Generally speaking, because it's a relatively humid environment where I live, and because the garlic is basically, you know, you think about the bulb has moisture. So even though it's wrapped in paper, you've got a wet thing wrapped in paper, and you put a bunch of wet things wrapped in paper in a closed environment in a cardboard box. Even though a cardboard box breathes, and I don't have it sealed up tight, I just have the tops folded over. But you can get mildew in that situation. I've had mixed results. Maybe if the box had more holes, I'm sure there's some way to do it, but they keep better in the fridge, right? Because you're mimicking what's going to really happen with the garlic, right? They stay underground where it's cool, and then it freezes, you know, the ground, you know, gets really cold in the winter. And, you know, mine, I mean, they're only planted like 3 inches deep. So that soil is freezing. So, you know, the garlic are kept very cold in the winter. So they're completely adapted, and they, you know, there's just not, they're dormant, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, right? When you put them in the refrigerator, they think it's November or something, right? And it's cold, and they go dormant, and they stay dormant. So the good part, the part you want to eat, doesn't start using its energy to grow sprouts, and you get a better flavor, longer lasting, you know, more ideal garlic. So I think that's it. I think it's all I got to say. Pick them, dry them out in the sun for a day, cut the tops and bottoms off. I mean, there's lots of people that do videos where they hang them and they braid them, and that's a soft neck garlic. These are hard neck garlic. It's a different type of garlic. Also, I mean, I've tried different methods. Any sort of system where I leave the necks on, it gets mold and mildew. It's just humid here. This is not an airtight garage. It has the same humidity as outdoors, basically. So it gets more and less humid, and it's just a humid. It's always humid here, even in the winter. So, but in this time of year, July, August, it's quite humid. So it's just a risk you don't want mold and mildew on anything you're trying to store. So I found this technique works the best. And I guess, and I've done videos on this, if you do find they have mold and mildew, you can save them. You just I've got videos on this, I'll put a link at the end because I can't remember the exact formula. But you just put them in, you bathe them in water. I've used water and bleach. I've also used water and hydrogen peroxide. Okay, just bathe them in that, rinse them off, dry them off, leave them in the sun for a few hours to get really nice and dry, and then bring them back to a situation like this and leave them under a fan for a week to cure again. And that should be all it takes. If you're, you know, if you leave them, it's not like a week. A week's a minimum, right? You can leave them longer if you want, but you don't want to leave them out in the sun and the UV and that sort of thing. You want them in, you know, in a sort of controlled environment out of the sun with airflow. All right, so short video on picking, curing, and preserving garlic. Hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, and until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.